So I know a lot of people are super interested in what a day in the life of a NICU nurse is like. So that is this video. I'm gonna just talk through everything that happens in my day-to-day life, and then I'll try to include some footage of me actually being at work. But it's tricky obviously because I can't show any of the babies or like the facility for the most part, but we'll do our best. So my day at work starts off at 6:38 whenever I'm able to clock in. We have to wait until 6:38 to clock in because I'm supposed to get there at 6:45, and that's like the earliest time that would count as 6:45. And then after that I put my stuff in the break room, and then I go to the scrub-in station, and we have to do a 3-minute hand scrub. You get the sponge and you make sure everything from your hands to your elbows are completely scrubbed, and we can't wear like watches or anything. Can't wear any jewelry, can't have any fingernail polish. Nails have to be cut short. We're bare below the elbows. So we scrub, and then after we scrub, we go into the huddle. The huddle is just the meeting room where all the nurses that are on the day shift that day meet up, and the charge nurse comes in and gives us a report, and we go over like what the census is, who the doctor and nurse practitioner on call is, and that's also where we get our assignments. Usually if I work the day before, I'll have the same babies, but sometimes that changes if people float to our unit that day and they need an easier assignment, and so they have to take the babies that I was caring for. It all kind of depends, but our census for the last like few months has been really high, like record-breaking high, so we usually have a lot of floats. So it's not always super predictable what babies I'll get. But your day is always so much easier if you get the same babies, obviously, that you've had before, because you already know them, you know the family situation. Bedside report is super easy at that point because you're just asking for updates instead of giving the whole story. Yeah, there are a lot of benefits to having the same babies, and it's also like good for the families, like have a familiar face that they know and they trust, and you become like first name basis with the family. It just definitely helps with their time in the NICU. So usually I have between 2 and 3 patients. More often than not, I'll have 3. I'll only ever have 2 whenever there is just a ton of lines going in and they're probably on like CPAP or something that just requires a lot of attention otherwise. I definitely prefer only having 2 babies. It's a lot easier to manage my time that way, but yeah, I usually have 3 babies, and right now I'm only trained to level 2. Our NICU is a level 3, but for the first year I'll just be trained on level 2, and then after a year I'll be trained up to level 3. And level 3 is whenever we have the intubated babies and the babies with like extra special care on like ventilators and stuff. But right now I can have up to like CPAPs and all the like central lines and stuff I can take care of. So our unit holds, I think it's 56 bed spaces that we have, and then we also have 2 overflow areas, which we're always in. Right now we have, I think, 80 babies, so we're taking over postpartum's nursery, and there's also another overflow area that's pretty close to the NICU that we're using. So there are a lot of babies. Okay, so once I have my assignment, I go to the part of the NICU that I'm in, and I just ask around who has my babies, and hopefully it's the same nurse that has all 3 of them, so that it's easy to give a report, and it's just like that's the only person you're with and it goes by quicker. But sometimes it's like you have 3 babies and they're each taken care of by a different nurse, so you have to like track down who has each baby, and it usually takes a lot longer than that. So I much prefer whenever it's just same nurse giving you a report on all the babies. Makes it easier. So each bed space has what we call a cardex. Has all the baby's information, or most of the information that I would need. Has all the orders in there, has what lines are in, has what tubes are in, has what schedule the baby's on, has some mom history information, baby history information. Everything that I mostly need to know is on the cardex, and then the nurse that's off-going gives me a report and basically goes through everything, fills in the details that the cardex doesn't have on it. And then if the family happens to be there, then I would introduce myself at that point. So after I've gotten a report from the nurse and have all my questions answered, that's whenever I start cleaning the workspace that I'll be in that day. So we have these purple wipes that basically kill anything and everything. And I always make sure that I'm wearing gloves whenever I do this because these wipes can give you cancer apparently, so we don't want that. So I clean the baby's area, a computer that I'll be at for the day. I'll usually clean my work phone and my personal phone off as well, and then the pens that I'm using for the day, I'll clean those too. And then after that is whenever we do our safety checks. So that's whenever I check and make sure that the bag and mask is working and that it's properly inflated like we need it to be in case we have to use it to provide PPV to a baby. And then if my baby has any central lines or any IVs at that point too, I would also check their IV sites and make sure that the site is not inflamed or showing any signs of swelling or signs of infection or anything like that, and just making sure that everything is good and safe for them. After I do this, I'll look on the EMR and see what meds are due for the baby and at what time. And then this is also the time, if I have time, then I'll transfer the information from the Cardex over to my piece of paper so that everything is just more easy to read. And yeah. In NICU we have a thing called touch times, and those are the times that we give the babies medications and we do the full assessment and we bottle feed them, or their moms come and breastfeed them, or we have to gavage feed them. They have 4 touch times a day, 4 touch times a night, and those are either like at 8, 11, 2 and 5, 8:30, 11:30, 2:30 or 5:30, or 9, 12, 3 and 6. That's why we don't normally have more than 3 babies on an assignment for a nurse, because 4 baby assignments get really heavy and you have to squeeze everything in, and 2 babies have to be on like the same touch time. So after I'm done transferring all the baby's information on my personal paper, I'll put the Cardex back at their bedsides so that like doctors and stuff who come by can look at it real quick if they need to reference something. Or like speech therapists, occupational therapists, they can all come by and look at it too. So by now it's like 8 o'clock, so I would start my first baby. Before I even touch them while they're still asleep, I would write down all their vital signs. We have them all on their monitors, so it has the heart rate, the respiratory rate, and the oxygen saturation. So I would write those all down because they're definitely going to change as soon as I touch the baby and wake them up. And on the first round, we always have to get blood pressures. So usually I try to maneuver a leg out of the swaddle to get the blood pressure before I do anything else so that the baby's not super angry and it gives me a false reading. And then afterwards, I would check the temperature so that it can also be accurate to what the baby was before it's all unswaddled after I've assessed it already. And then after I got the temperature, that's whenever I start the head to toe assessment. So I'll start at their scalp and feel their sutures and their fontanelles to make sure that it's not swollen. I'll see how their sutures are because that's something that we have to chart if they're like separated, approximated, or overriding. And I'll move down to the face, make sure that there's no scratches, make sure that the eyes are clear, that they don't have any drainage. And now is also the time that I would listen to their heart and listen to their lungs and make sure that they don't have any murmurs and that their lungs are clear and don't have any like coarse fluidy sounds in them. I would move down to their stomach and make sure that I can hear bowel sounds in all 4 quadrants. And then I would also touch their belly and make sure that it's soft and not distended. And then now is also the time whenever I would check NG tube placement. So we do that by aspirating a little bit of air into their tube, usually 2 mils, and then we listen for it over the stomach. If they're on CPAP, they usually have a lot of air in their belly, so now is also the time that I would pull that air out, or at least like some of it. And then afterwards, I would change their diaper, look at all their skin, make sure that there's no like weird cuts or anything, flip them over, look at their back, make sure that their back isn't reddened or have like any weird scratches. I would look at their bottom and see if there's any like Mongolian spots or other birthmarks. I would also look at their bottom at this time to make sure that there's no redness or skin breakdown. If there is, then I would apply probably cholestyramine or Desitin, some sort of diaper cream on it after the diaper change. And then obviously I would change my gloves after doing the diaper and throwing that away. If they're on fluids, I would have to weigh the diaper. The doctors want to make sure that what's going in is also what's coming out, or roughly the same. I would also check the IV site again at this point if they had an IV. If they have any meds due, I would give it to them at this point. A lot of babies in the morning usually get caffeine to help with their respirations. And then I also make sure that the IV is running exactly what it's supposed to at the right rate, and I check it against the order to make sure that that is all correct. Once I'm finished assessing the baby and giving the medications, then I'll re-swaddle the baby, and this is usually the time that we would either gavage feed them or bottle feed them if they're not NPO. So I'd bottle feed the baby. If it's breast milk or something that had to be in the fridge, then I would have that warming while I was assessing the baby, and so it's ready to go. I would check the order to make sure what I'm feeding them is exactly what they're supposed to be getting, and then I would check the amount as well. So some babies have a minimum, some babies have exactly this amount, some babies are just volume as tolerated, so they can have as much as they want as long as they don't puke it all up. So once I have the correct amount in the bottle, then I would bottle feed them if they're able to do so, and whatever they don't take, I would gavage it if they have a minimum. So I'd put it on the syringe pump over the certain amount of time, usually 30 minutes or 60 minutes, sometimes longer if they've had reflux issues. Forgot to mention earlier, but if the baby's on CPAP, then the respiratory therapist would come at the touch time also. So we could assess the nares, the columella, the nasal bridge all together, make sure that there's no redness or skin breakdown. And they might change from like nasal mask to nasal prongs, depending on how the baby's tolerating it. Might put some Mepilex, which is just like a nose protectant sponge thing to prevent like further irritation on the nose. And then if the baby's just on a normal nasal cannula, not CPAP, then that's just an assessment that I would make myself and make sure that there's no redness or skin breakdown around the nares or columella, which is that part. So yeah, after the baby's done bottle feeding, obviously make sure that I burp them, then I'll put them back in their beds. Then I may or may not have to gavage the rest, it just depends on the baby. So yeah, all of that is within one touch time, so a 30-minute window of time that I have to do all that before it's time to jump right into the next baby. So same story for the next baby and the next baby. And then after that, after the 9 o'clock touch time is over, then that's usually whenever I call parents to give them an update, just a morning update to see if they're going to come in today, how they fed overnight, if they're bottle feeding, how much weight the baby gained, who the doctor is if they ask, and what the general plan of care is for today. And then if the baby is due for a bath that day and it's on days, so our baths switch between day shift and night shift. So if the baby is due for a bath that day, I would probably try to plan it to when the family is going to be there so that they can be involved in that. Then after I'm done calling my parents, that's whenever I would chart. Yeah, I'd basically chart the whole assessment that I did, chart the safety stuff that I did, chart their intake, chart their output. If any labs were drawn, I would chart the results of the labs that were drawn at 5 a.m. if they had any. Just like I said, every baby is different, so obviously I'm going to be charting different things per baby. So usually if I'm lucky and not super stressed, I would have a little bit of a break between like 10:30 and 11 before the next touch time. So this is whenever some people will actually most people get breakfast on my unit. And so we would all alternate which times we're going so that someone can always be with the babies. Obviously a good number of nurses with the babies at all time while one nurse leaves, etc. So if I'm lucky, I would get a breakfast that day. But more often than not, I don't eat breakfast at this time. And I usually just spend more time planning my day out and getting stuff together for a bath if I'm gonna have to do a bath, or organizing the bed space a little bit better. Sometimes babies just take a long time to bottle feed, though we have a 30-minute limit for how long they can bottle feed, but if they take that full 30 minutes, then your touch times are not going to be 30 minutes long, they're going to be 45 minutes long. So it's just, sometimes I don't get any time off before the next touch time starts after the first round. But the first round touch time usually is what takes the longest, because that's whenever you're doing a major assessment of the baby versus, and seeing the baby for the first time, versus the other touch times are more just making sure that everything hasn't changed from your previous assessment. If the parents are there, then I would let them do the temperature and diaper before I start. and that way they get to be involved as well. So yeah, same story for the 11, the 11:30, and the 12 o'clock touch times for the babies. And then after the 12 o'clock touch time is whenever I go to lunch, so I don't chart immediately after my touch time usually. I'll go to lunch and then chart whenever I come back, and then by that point it's usually time to start the third round of touch times. So after the third round of touch times, I chart everything, and then this is whenever I get supplies for night shift and mix milk if I have to. So sometimes we have like weird combinations of formula and breast milk that we give them based on their nutritional needs. So it's pretty time consuming to mix a lot of milk. So that's whenever I do this, to make sure that night shift has enough milk mixed up for their entire shift, and also has everything stocked in the beds that they need. So all the bottles that they need, all the syringes that they need, all the heel warmers if they have to do glucose checks, all the pokers, same thing for the glucose checks. And then if baths are on nights, then if I have extra time, I would get their bath stuff ready as well. And yeah, this is normally the time that we actually have free time in the NICU, or at least I actually have free time. Other people are a lot faster than me, but I feel like my touch times always take a lot longer than everybody else's touch times, but I'm just thorough. I'm not slow, I'm thorough. But my touch times have gotten faster as I've been more confident in my routine and like just going through everything quicker. And so I might have like around 20 minutes of free time, like actual, not having any obligation free time. And this is whenever I would check my work email to see what all the updates are. Sometimes I have different assignments to do since I'm still in the residency program. So I would sometimes have time to work on those at this point too. That way it's all in company time and I don't have to put in a request later for that. And soon enough it will be 5 o'clock, and that is whenever my last round of touch times begins. And I once again go through all the motion of the touch times, chart everything, and then wait for night shift to arrive. And once I get there, give them a report and deuce out. So that is just what a very standard day looks like for me. Obviously sometimes things go crazy and they're not always as routine as that, and sometimes one baby requires a lot of my attention and the other two are just super quick. Sometimes a baby starts going downhill on my shift and requires obviously a lot of extra work, and always checking to see if there's any new orders and making a lot of changes, like respiratory wise, medication wise, fluids wise for the baby if need be. But yeah, those are the shifts that I usually have to stay late at. I think I've only had like 3 shifts that I had to stay past 8 o'clock, but usually the time I leave is 7:15. The latest I've stayed on just a normal shift is like 9:30, 9:20, something like that, and that was the day that I had a baby that was going downhill, so required a lot of extra things. And then it also makes your day super crazy if you have to admit a baby, and that's just like a whole nother story of charting, orders, trying to work your other baby's touch times into that. At some point it's just becomes very stressful very quickly and requires a lot of extra time and effort to do said things. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed this chatty day in the life of a NICU nurse, and let me know if you have any more suggestions for videos in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Subscribe for more. Bye!